What's up, everyone? Before we dive into my yearly recap and annual ramble, we'll call it, I do want to shout out our partners at Dreamfuel. So, Dreamfuel is the mental performance coaching platform for tech teams. They rock. I was actually just catching up with one of their coaches this morning, and he let me know that he just did a breath work with a big company that recently crossed 500 million in ARR. One we all know, but I'm not quite sure if I'm allowed to say their name, so I'm going to err on the side of caution. But he did an in-person guided breathwork and visualization session for their team of 70 execs, and the energy in the room was electric. It was unmatched. And this company actually took them up on Dreamfuel's special offer, only for Wake Up Call listeners. So they are actually giving away a free custom coaching session for your entire organization or team. Usually they charge at least $2,500 for one of these, but they are taking over the tech scene right now and are offering it for free just for Wake Up Call listeners. So go to www.dreamfuel.com/wakeupcall to snag yours. Now onto the episode. What a year. I've been doing my best to reflect on the past year. Figured I'd jump on here and try to reflect in real time with you. Haven't done a solo episode in a while. I think I've shared this before, but there's been this interesting friction over the last 9 months, I guess, of wanting to share some of my ideas and learnings while also not wanting to contribute to the noise of the world, which is weird when you're building a media company, but or a media project, we'll call it. I've learned, just like firsthand, the power of switching off, disconnecting, tuning out, actually decreasing the amount of imprints that I take in from the world. And so, yeah, creating more content, podcast feels interesting, but I definitely had an idea when I launched this. I was going to publish many more podcasts than I have, write more newsletters, and share more on social, but I do think if I had followed that plan, I would have missed kind of the whole point of what I'm doing. I've focused primarily on going inward and only shared when it felt right. And I want to thank all of you through the lack of consistency for showing up, listening every week, sending nice notes, emails of support. It's been really cool. And I laugh that I've somehow become, it's like Silicon Valley's unregistered therapist. I can't tell you how many people, execs, people early in their career, people that have built incredible careers, founders who have reached out to me because of my story and just been like, hey, I'm going through it. I resonate with your story. Can we jump on a call? Can we jump on a Zoom? And yeah, it's always weird. I feel conflicted when people resonate with my story and feel stuck or disillusioned with the constant chase, because I know that struggle and it's not always fun, but conversations have been cool when people just need to vent or some little advice. But yeah, I feel very grateful to have made the choice to step back from everything and give myself space. And I do realize that not everyone has that option. So that is the reason I feel called to share. That's what gets me out and into recording mode or writing mode. I think I share for the folks who can't do what I'm doing. You know, life is complex. There's financial reasons, there's kids, there's mortgages. So I do it for the folks that can't do what I'm doing, and then hopefully to inspire some of the ones that feel like they can't. But yeah, where to begin? A lot can change in a year. This time last year, I was in Puerto Escondido. I had just celebrated a friend's wedding. We then went on like a friend's moon, partying up on the beach. And I had so many people congratulating me about my success and the fund. But inside, even then, I felt like just a shell of my former self. And I was numbing heavy with alcohol, drugs. And I remember on that trip having just one of the worst panic attacks I've ever had. Which is weird because from the outside, my life looked perfect, but on the inside, every day was a struggle. And I'm losing my voice. I kept a lot of that in. Very few people knew what I was going through at that time. My girlfriend did. Thank God for her and her support. A few close friends. But I came back from that trip and tried to slide right back into character. I went back to doing what I know how to do, which is grind it out. So I kept grinding all February. It was a really weird month. I was at I would say personal lowest, but TechCrunch had just released this big article highlighting GTM Fund and our latest fundraise, and it got a lot of attention. So again, I had colleagues, friends, family reaching out to congratulate me. And I didn't know how to, tell them how I was actually feeling. Like you want to break their heart, being like, oh yeah, I'm fucking miserable. Then March comes around and, I've got my mask on again. Pretty good at that. And I just pushed down those feelings as far as I possibly could. I had some heavy work travel, team yearly planning, and we needed to figure out, details for our next fundraise. So we do what we do, compartmentalize and move forward. That was the name of the game until, one weekend. I'll spare you the details, but I had a very tough couple nights. And, if you continue to push feelings down again and again and again, they will find a way to come up. So be careful. Anyway, I finally communicated how bad it was, how bad it had gotten with my family. I let the people I loved in for the first kind of time, and I asked for help. And that involves stepping away from everything for a little while and finally putting my mental and my physical health first. So in April, I stepped away for a few weeks, and it became obvious that I need to make some changes. So that's when the story, I guess, begins. As many people know, I stepped away from the fund with no real plan. But I knew if I didn't find a way to reconnect with myself and with the world, I was going to lose, whatever light there was left. And there wasn't a lot. Thanks for bearing with me as I've been losing my voice. It's terrible timing for losing my voice, but that led to, the crazy decision to sell my house and everything in it, toss whatever I had left in a backpack, and go travel the world to look for some answers. And as I was tying up the loose ends and saying goodbye to my old life in May, I just shared a little bit about what I was going through on LinkedIn. And, I was flooded with thousands and thousands of messages from people feeling the same way. And of course, it looks slightly different for everyone: burnout, workaholism, addiction, dealing with illness, divorce, adversity, all sorts of different trauma. But the core idea of feeling disillusioned with life was there. And usually it came from actually achieving or getting close to achieving this life that you thought you always wanted. And realizing it wasn't a thing, whether it was money or success or getting a house or something that you thought would make you feel good. You get it. And it's certainly not the thing. And that was the inception of Wake Up Call. And I found it interesting that it took me having an existential crisis for people in my life to share their real stories, not the social media-ified version. And so it was, what if we just shared our struggles openly so people can make life adjustments before they're in crisis? Would have been helpful for me. And so I started this podcast and a newsletter to go deeper with the idea to try to help people wake up before their wake-up call. Jury's out if we can do that. I do get a lot of nice messages from people, so hopefully it's having a bit of an impact. But yeah, continuing through the reflection of last year, by June, I was on my way to Bali, absolutely second-guessing my life choices the entire way, which continued for many, many months. And a childhood friend, Drew, who I recently interviewed, decided to join me. And I had a few friends already there. So surrounded myself with good people, focused on getting physically healthy again. And looking back, I think I was still sort of in shock. Yeah, kind of felt like I was just on vacation. Everything hadn't sunk in. So I was having a good time. But I think it was a bit of escapism. I wasn't facing anything yet. And then spent most of July in Lombok, hanging by the beach, diving with manta rays, reading a lot. That's when this voice, really started creeping in, which was, I need to do something. I need to achieve something. I'm falling behind. And, I realized that after years of constantly taking huge risks in business and taking on bigger and bigger challenges, that I had rewired my brain, and that some level of chaos to me actually feels more safe than stillness does. So I kept thinking it would be safer to go build something big again. And yeah, I think at that point I was pretty convinced that I had permanently fucked up my brain or my nervous system. And then I went into August, and August started off incredibly. I actually flew back to Vancouver, and I've talked about this, but to participate in a 5-MeO DMT retreat. It was also, filmed for a documentary, which we'll be releasing this year, which I'm excited to show everyone. But it was one of the most profound experiences in my life. If you want to read more about it, I did write in depth about it in my newsletter. We don't have time to go down that rabbit hole, but I deeply, deeply connected with myself and God, love, the universe, whatever you want to call it. And I remember thinking okay, I remember again. My life is just going to be great from here on out. And I flew to Thailand feeling really, really good. And then ended up experiencing some pretty serious, I guess you can call it ego whiplash, of What had I done? I worked so hard to build this life and now it's all gone. What am I doing? What am I doing halfway across the world in this Airbnb in Thailand? And it's rainy season, so it's raining all the time. It's like, what am I doing? And it was a tough one. It was a really tougher part of the year, but things keep moving. I didn't run back home, and September rolls around, and I fly over to Sri Lanka to meet my girlfriend, who has been incredibly supportive through this whole journey. And I feel guilty because I feel like I'm supposed to have figured some things out now, but I'm still feeling so lost and no wisdom to share. Nothing. But we had a good time. Sri Lanka is a beautiful country. Explored cave temples, surfed, adopted a few little street cats for 2 weeks, let them sleep with us. Didn't get fleas, so that was a big win. Ate some delicious dosas. And I think by the end of that month, so end of September, I started feeling like my overstimulated brain and nervous system slowly starting to regulate themselves again, which was a really good feeling. And then into October, I felt like I needed a challenge, so decided to fly to Nepal and hike to Everest Base Camp. Again, talked about this, but took 16 days, hiking 5 to 8 hours a day. I got to do it with my girlfriend and two of my childhood best friends. That was a big turning point for me. I don't know if I should attribute it to the magic that is the Himalayas and nature, if it was being surrounded by people, I love and that love me, or it was the forced, disconnection from technology, exercise, movement, or, the feeling of accomplishing something that's pretty hard, but I'm sure it was a mix of all of those things, but just started getting overwhelmed with feelings of gratitude and that I was connected to the world around me again. Yeah, I think that's when it hit. Like, this is pretty cool what I get to do in my life. And then I went deeper into that feeling in November. I flew to India and spent most of my month meditating in ashrams, which was very new to me, but so cool. I was in and around Rishikesh, which is in the north. Spent 5 days in one ashram, 15 days in another. Most of that in silence, meditating 6 to 10 hours a day between meditation and yoga. Lots and lots of stillness, lots and lots of silence. 6 days were in complete silence. That includes reading, writing, anything. I'm not even supposed to make eye contact. And I did write about that in my newsletter. And maybe I'll go deeper on it in another solo episode. But, oh man, silence is definitely a technology that we lost. By about day 4, my brain was working completely differently because I didn't have all these imprints from the outside world. I don't think we realize how much of our thoughts are influenced by our environment and what's around us and things that are vying for our attention. So when you cut that out, it's pretty incredible. The human brain left to its own devices. We're so quick to Google something or chat GPT something, but if you sit alone in silence for a few hours, the answer's likely going to come to you, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I don't think my brain has worked that way since I was a kid, at least before smartphones. There was no technology too, which was cool. Just felt my creativity explode and a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a really long time. So it was rad. And then in December, after I left the ashram, I spent most of my time in solitude and reflection. I had a lot to process, also to like integrate. I think it's easy to follow a schedule, feel peaceful, and all this stuff when you're in an ashram. Like it's, you just kind of give yourself to the process. But then when real life comes, responsibilities, things, people, chaos of everyday life, that's when the real work starts. So did a lot of yoga in the morning, meditation in the yoga, and then would plop myself down and write primarily for myself, sitting on a little pillow on the ground in this cool little coffee shop I found. And yeah, then during one of those meditations, I decided I should jump on a 15-hour flight home to be with my family for Christmas because my Nana's getting old and who knows how many Christmases she'll have. So yeah, it was the right decision. So I came home and had a beautiful rest of the months catching up with friends and family. I did have a little hiccup. Actually ended up in the ER in Delhi the day before I was supposed to catch my flight. I went into anaphylactic shock from a allergic reaction when I was by myself. So casual near-death experience. So that's yeah, I don't want to dive into that. It was crazy. I feel grateful that that went the way it did. I didn't have an EpiPen or Benadryl or anything on me, so thank God for quick Uber drivers that got me to the hospital. And now here we are, feeling grateful about life, recording this, thinking about how wild this journey called life is, and how much I appreciate all of you for rocking with me this year. I've felt very supportive, and it's been cool to hear the impact that this has had on some of you and people following along. Yeah, it means a lot. It's cool to put yourself out there and it be received the way it has been. And yeah, in 2 days, I fly back to India, meeting up with some friends in Kerala, which is southern India. It'll be different than Rishikesh, kind of like beachy jungles. Go to another kind of yoga retreat type thing. Not like a bougie one, just like a tiny little one that's run by two sisters, locals on the beach. Yeah. I have a friend joining me, getting the band back together. It should be cool. So that's the update of what's been happening. I guess the more important stuff is what I've been learning. And I try to write a lot, but I'll take a stab at articulating some of the things that have been rattling around my brain and maybe things I've relearned or started to look at a little bit differently. Number one is I think it is borderline irresponsible now not to meditate daily. Certainly is for me. I think it is for everyone. I think if everyone just spent 20 minutes meditating, the world would look like a very, very different place. And yeah, it's just about slowing down for a sec. And if your brain wants to race, let it race. And if you just need to sit there and go through your thoughts for 20 minutes, do that. You know, I think a lot of people try meditation. They're like, well, I can't still my thoughts, so I'm not doing it, so I'm going to stop. You know, sometimes I can get to that place of actual stillness, but still many, many times it's not that. But just slowing down and going inward is so important. One of our teachers at the ashram put meditation in like the greatest way possible. which I think will make you want to do it more. Uh, he called it washing the mind's fabric on the infinity stream. Pretty good meditation marketing. No, tell your family you're going to meditate. Say, I'm going to wash my brain on the infinity stream. Pretty good. That's one. So that's something I've been incorporating into my life and just making it a non-negotiable, just like movement should be looked at the same. Another thing, and I think I've shared this in maybe another episode, but I'll say it again, is this idea of giving back and the difference between the East and the West in that regard. And I think about it as there's a lot of charitable people in the West for sure. But usually we look to give back when the cup we have is already overflowing with resources, money, and then whatever spillage is left, we'll share that with people that are less fortunate with us, which is noble, honorable. But so many times during my travel, you've seen people with next to nothing, whose cups are barely even 1/100th full, and they're willing to give up half of that or all of that to help people around them, whether it's friends, family, or a stranger. And that's pretty cool. And I think that's something we should all think about a little more. How can we give back, with our time, attention, our money, even when we don't feel like we have a lot of those things? Because that's sometimes when it means, the most. Another thing, I've written about this, but in the same vein of the difference between the East and West, is this idea that I think all we're taught in the West is how to do things, from kindergarten through university. It's like, here's how you do math, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. And it's all about building skills, which are necessary. But there's no time or place. I can't remember any teaching on how to be, just how to be with your thoughts, how to find silence, how to find stillness. And a lot of the Eastern traditions, philosophies, ways of thinking are much more centered in being versus doing. And I think it's being aware of how much of your identity is tied up in doing versus being, and how bad a lot of us, certainly myself, are at being. And just like we flex the muscle again and again of doing, on how do I do more? How do I be more productive? We've been doing that one a lot. And so that muscle's grown really strong, but we don't spend any time growing the muscle of like being and that presence and being comfortable in your own brain is big. So it's something I'm thinking about. Case number 4 is a funny one, and I wrote in depth about this for a couple weeks, but my relationship to technology is changing quite a bit. As a former tech exec and VC that invested in a lot of technology, probably sound hypocritical for this one, but mostly it's around consumer technology. It's attached to our phone, that's easily accessible, that I'm having a hard time with right now. It feels pretty evil, pretty bad. I definitely noticed it in like this crazy way when I was in the ashram and we didn't have access to our phones except for a tiny bit at night, and you would pick it up. I think by day 2, I was calling it the fear blaster, because you would just pick this thing up and it would just blast fear at you through notifications, through social media, through news. It was just a lot. And when you're silent and meditating and not in the chaos of modern life, you you can pick up on these things so much more, and the mood changes it would have. It would completely destroy my mood, and I never noticed that in modern life. It was just like, oh, this is just how I feel all the time. But it was so obvious that these things are, and these apps, they are designed to be highly, highly addictive and to cause controversy. And yeah, we have to set up guardrails against them because it's actually not normal. I know we've all normalized it. And phone's just like part of life, and social media is part of life. But if you give yourself some space, even a few days away from them, and then go back, it's so obvious that these things are toxic. These are poison. And it led me down some rabbit holes of, yeah, like this idea that almost all of societal change has been driven by technology over the last 50 years. Almost all. There's some good things that we organized and got together and pushed forward, but most of it were unconscious changes driven by technology. And technology is driven by companies who are making a profit. And so they're not always in our best interests. Most often they're not. We're told that we're making a trade that doesn't end up being the trade that we're actually making. And, I look at consumer AI, ChatGPT, Gemini. We're about to trade our creative and critical thinking and task execution for convenience. Those skills will atrophy, just like we've seen with direction skills when you use Google Maps. Our ability to have good grammar with Grammarly and spell check. Like, these things are convenient, they're great. But the skills that we outsource to them end up atrophying. And there's a million examples I could go through, but this next trade we're about to make is a big one. What do humans do except for critically and creatively think? We're going to outsource that. It's going to have some implications that I'm not sure we're all thinking about too much, just because it's convenient and it's making things faster. Part of the reason I don't use any AI to help me proofread or write copywriting for my newsletter. It's not that I don't think it would make it better. It for sure would, but I'm going to become more and more reliant on it. And my writing's going to suffer. And in 10 years, I'll be a shitty writer, as will a lot of people, if you don't make an intentional choice not to use it in certain scenarios. But that's a rabbit hole. Maybe we'll go down that more another day. Another one I've been thinking about, which is in a similar vein, this comes from a conversation I was having with a really smart older gentleman at one of the ashrams I was at. And we were talking about just like how humans, learn things and evolve and adapt. And he was talking about how humans have always learned primarily through three ways: contemplation, observation, and logic. And with the explosion of science and the scientific method, which is incredible, thank God for science. But what it did is made the last two much more important: observation and logic. Those two became our North Star. In order for something to be true, for us to learn it and adopt it, it had to be observable, and it had to be logic-based. And we lost that third leg of the stool, which was contemplation. Humans, since the dawn of time, when they had a question, they would just sit there and think about it, for a really long time. And through that contemplation, new questions would emerge, oftentimes the initial question you're looking for isn't actually the right question. And you would come to what truth meant for you. I think that's really important because truth is nuanced. Truth is messy. I think losing that contemplation piece is tough. And again, it almost feels like a rebellion to bring that back in your own life. You have to be very intentional with that and not immediately go to a source to find the answer. Because I think in the contemplation and the act of sitting with a thought and not knowing for a long period of time is a beautiful human thing and unlocks a bunch of different doors that don't get opened if you just immediately get the answer. Easier said than done. That's something I'm trying to bring more into my life. All right, I'll share maybe a couple more. I'll stop rambling. Also, then there's very little that like 10 super deep belly breaths can't fix, which was crazy because I spent probably 10 years of my life trying to change my state from depressed to happy to sleepy to energetic to whatever to whatever. I was never happy with the state I was currently in. You kind of have the power to at least bring yourself back to a balanced state with breath, which is wild. It's something you have to practice, but it's true, at least true for me. All right, I guess I'll wrap this up with something I wrote when I was in the ashram. It's a pretty simple list. It says things I must not forget. You are completely insignificant. You are God. You are loved. Nothing matters. Everything matters. You must stay balanced. Meditate daily. Do yoga daily. Your breath is everything. You are not your thoughts. Silence will guide you. You are not alone. I love you. Everything is perfect. Pain and struggle are teachers. Call your mom and dad. Go for a walk. Fear is an illusion. Get up early. Go to bed early. Your phone is evil. This is the only life you'll get to be you. Try to enjoy the ride. Discipline and virtue turn shadow into light. Smile. Pretty simple. Forget them all the time, though. Trying to stay in a state of remembering more and more, though. I think that's it. Again, thank you. Thank you. Have a beautiful day. Have a beautiful week. I'll talk to you soon.